Today on This Week in Iowa, the state parties prepare for tomorrow's caucuses. Then Governor Kim Reynolds fills the last vacancy on the Iowa Supreme Court left by Chief Justice Mark Cady's death. A look at the state of the race with just over 24 hours from the caucuses. Plus, we sit down with an undecided voter and her plan for tomorrow night. Thank you for joining us on This Week in Iowa. I'm Stephanie Engelson.
And I'm Jack Miller. We are filling in for Sabrina Ahmed, of course, as she takes a few months off for maternity leave. Well, we are just one day away from the Iowa caucuses, and there's not much the candidates can do now really to persuade Iowa voters, especially if those voters have their choices locked in. Still, the candidates and campaigns are just not letting up. And this year, the caucuses are a little different than years past. Democrats have changed some of their rules.
One change relates to how they're reporting results. In the past, the Iowa Democratic Party released only how many state delegates each candidate won. This year, they're releasing raw totals. And that's caused one undecided voter to consider caucusing for Senator Cory Booker, even though he's dropped out of the race.
I'm contemplating still aligning for Cory Booker during the first alignment and then realigning with another candidate when I see what the room looks like, which is a little scary. And I don't know if that's the best strategy, but it's the one that I feel most comfortable with right now.
And we'll speak with another undecided voter later on in the show. The new reporting rules have some worried the winner of the Democratic caucus in Iowa may not be the person with the majority of support. Now, over the course of last week, Local 5 put together quick videos on how the caucuses work this year. It's called Our Caucus Curriculum. You can find those on weareiowa.com.
The parties have been working hard preparing for tomorrow night, holding numerous trainings for their chairs. The Republicans say they've hosted more than 100 training sessions, while Democrats expect almost half that. Democrats expect more than 2,000, with this being the first chair experience for many. The Democratic Party is expected to have 2,000 volunteers come through its training. Last week, just days before the caucuses, President Trump visited Iowa, as did Vice President Mike Pence. Mr. Trump arrived on Drake's University campus for an event at the Knapp Center on Thursday.
People started camping out early to be first in line. Des Moines police beefed up security and worked with Drake to make sure everyone stayed safe, with several protests planned beforehand.
We're going to switch gears away from the caucuses. Governor Kim Reynolds appointing Dana Oxley to fill the vacancy left by Chief Justice Mark Cady's death at the Iowa Supreme Court. Oxley is an attorney at Shuttleworth and Ingersoll in Cedar Rapids. She's a graduate of the University of Iowa College of Law and has argued before the Iowa Supreme Court and the Iowa Court of Appeals.
I sought this appointment to serve you. I accept this appointment with great humbleness and honor. I promise to uphold the Constitution and the laws of this great state, to decide cases fairly and impartially, and to administer justice to the best of my ability.
Oxley is the second female to be chosen for the Iowa Supreme Court by Governor Reynolds and her third appointment to the Iowa Supreme Court.
Coming up next, Senator Bernie Sanders' last-minute rise in the Iowa polls. Is that likely to stand come tomorrow night?
Education, healthcare, national security.
Your vote impacts our country's future.
February 3rd, Local 5 reports live from caucus locations and candidate parties, sharing live updates, minute-by-minute results, and expert analysis.
Iowa Caucus 2020, your voice, your vote. Coverage begins at 5, and at 7, we take you inside one caucus to show you from beginning to end what happens.
On February 3rd, use your voice.
And watch Local 5's coverage of the Iowa Caucus on air and at weareiowa.com.
Donald Trump is the most corrupt president in American history. But the greed and corruption undermining our democracy is bigger than one man. And so is the solution. When we stand together, we will make billionaires pay their fair share, provide better wages for workers, and equal pay for women. We will expand Social Security and guarantee health care for all. I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message because the future doesn't belong to Trump and his billionaire friends. It belongs to us.
Let's go! Happy New Year. It's 2020. Make a plan, an unlimited plan. At U.S. Cellular, our unlimited plans start at just $30. $30 for all you can post, stream, and share on our super strong, super fast network. You can even call your mom.
Hey, Mom, what's up?
So why wait? Stop paying more with the other guys and start saving with U.S. Cellular. Just $30 a month. It's the unlimited plan of your future. U.S. Cellular. Choose fair.
During the first year and a half of my first daughter's life, she suffered with anemia. It was scary. So seeing our NP, nurse practitioner, she came up with a plan how to treat it. She was always there. She's actually a part of the family. Choosing an NP was the right choice for my family. I wouldn't trade it for anything. My name is Charlene, and we choose NPs.
Me too. Consider an NP. When patients choose, patients win.
You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back. We are joined by ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you're very busy because it's caucus eve, and this is it.
This is the Super Bowl. Well, the Super Bowl's happening too. It's all at once.
So much going on right now, but in the world of politics, this is it. The candidates just have a few more moments to really get their name out there and get those undecideds. The last week, really, we've seen Bernie Sanders kind of surge ahead here. So what's your take on that? Do you think he can hold that momentum going into tomorrow night?
He has a real good shot at winning the caucuses. A lot of people think he had more people show up for him 4 years ago in that battle against Hillary Clinton. Of course, he lost by just a couple of tenths of a percentage point. And look, if he has more people show up, the Sanders campaign is going to point to that and say, we won. We actually got the most enthusiasm behind our candidate. Despite or regardless of whatever happens with the delegate count, very possible that we have multiple winners coming out of Iowa, but Bernie Sanders' campaign will go on regardless. He's very strong in New Hampshire as well, and I think a lot more people are going to be feeling the burn before the end of the cycle. Okay, so what other trends do you think we're going to see tomorrow night in the caucus? Well, the alignments are so interesting here because one is just who shows up. Again, Bernie Sanders is kind of the favorite for that metric, but the second is who's the consensus choice, because there are all these candidates who may not have enough support in individual rooms or across a congressional district to be viable and to have enough support to actually win delegates. That's what this is about ultimately. It's about putting those points on the board, and it's possible another candidate, maybe Joe Biden, who's neck and neck with Bernie Sanders in the polls, could come out on top. The polls have showed really 4 candidates who are within striking distance of the top, and a 5th, Amy Klobuchar, who's close to getting delegates as well. We've never had a situation where 5 people walked out with some kind of a prize out of Iowa. That could happen. It could also be a bad kind of wake-up call for some of the candidates. People like Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, I think, needs to overperform expectations. Any of them, if they're not able to say, look, here are the delegates that we won out of Iowa, that's a big disappointment. So you mentioned that Bernie Sanders obviously has name recognition in New Hampshire, which is their next test. So coming out of this, what do candidates need to do here to then get themselves known in New Hampshire? Well, a lot of it is momentum. If you were able to win in Iowa or come close in Iowa, then the national media starts following you around. People will show up at your town halls in New Hampshire over the coming week. So but that just builds upon itself. It's a real concrete demonstration of support for the first time. It feels like caucuses and primaries go on forever. But now when the voters actually weigh in for the first time, that tells people, look, it's not just that they've got an organization. It's not just that they can raise money, not just that they can hire staff. They've got actual human beings who are going to show up for them under not ideal conditions. Let's face it, going to a caucus is not easy. You got to do it on a weeknight and find out where it is, and it could be cold out or snowing out. So people have to be invested in your candidacy. And if you can do that in Iowa, history has shown that it spills over into New Hampshire and beyond. And let's talk a little bit about the changes the Iowa Democratic Party made. I mean, we could see some, we're not sure what we're going to see really because this is new. Do you think we could see multiple winners? It's very possible that someone wins that first alignment who's different than that second alignment, who might be different than the actual points of what are called the state delegate equivalents. And that all of that could even theoretically be different than the final number, how many national delegates. Candidates will spin it. Campaigns will come out and declare victory about different portions of the numbers out of Iowa, and they may all be right. They're just different stories to tell. So winning Iowa, quote unquote, is not quite what it has been in the past, and I think it's going to be subject to interpretation. So that could really give an advantage to somebody who may not full out win Iowa, but they can go into New Hampshire and say, look, we got this. I'll tell you, some of the campaigns campaigns are talking about how do we get out there early to define the storyline before it gets defined for us. Okay. Do you go out there even before the results are finalized, declare victory, and get on that plane to Manchester, New Hampshire, and start the campaigning all over again? There's going to be a lot of gamesmanship around that and trying to decide and to determine who gets the momentum out of Iowa.
Sure. Do you see anyone maybe not in the top 5 breaking through and kind of making a headline for themselves tomorrow night?
Well, the bad kind of headlines is dropping out, and that I think is almost inevitable in a field this big. Iowa's already had significant culling of this field. There's been several candidates, people like Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke, who got into it quite heralded. They weren't able to catch fire, and the failure to catch on in Iowa was a piece of that. Look, there's always a possibility. I know John Delaney spent a ton of time in the state. Tom Steyer's been spending a lot of time and money around the state. If any of them are really going to shock people, it would shock people. There would be a big surprise. But right now, this looks like it's a race between those 5. Maybe keep an eye on Andrew Yang. He's not part of the conversation, but he's got pockets of really strong support.
Okay. So with just a few moments left, I mean, really, what do these candidates need to be doing to make that final push?
Spin. A lot of it is about interpretation. I'll tell you, you got to close the deal. And there's so many caucus goers that we've talked to, that you've talked to, that really haven't made up their mind. They have impressions. They know the candidates. They know who's out there. That close matters. And the fact that Joe Biden's being attacked by President Trump in Iowa may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing for his candidacy. The fact that some Democrats are starting to take on Bernie Sanders, maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. Maybe some voters are going to tune out the negativity and go with someone else. But it is about the close at this point.
Do you think that the broad field that we had with really diverse candidates and then also this change of rule and strategy, do you think that's left a lot of voters kind of confused and undecided on who they want to support?
We heard from voters early in the process they wanted fewer options. They've got fewer options, but it's still a lot. And I think the caucuses can be intimidating, and showing up and having to publicly declare your allegiance for someone and go to a corner of the room and maybe talk your friends and neighbors into it, it's all difficult. And I think for a lot of people that are experiencing it for the first time, there's a high barrier to entry. But I think that the party's made some changes to try to make it easier to participate, and a lot of people are talking about record turnout.
I can't wait to see what happens.
Me neither.
All right, thank you so much. Good to see you again, Rick.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Coming up next, Iowa Democratic caucus goers have a number of candidates to choose from tomorrow night. Their behavior ahead of the caucuses.
We have a president who thinks everything is about him. His tweets, his golf courses, his ego. But I think the job is about you. Your health care, your schools, your security, your families, and your future. I'm Amy Klobuchar. I'll be a president and a commander-in-chief who restores decency to the White House and gets things done for you. That's why I approve this message.
And we certainly do say good morning, America.
Hit it, people.
Good morning, Iowa. Thanks for joining us.
A lot of smiles around here this morning.
We can feel it in here, people. We can feel it.
Incredible. Thanks for starting your day with us.
We're going to celebrate.
We got it all.
A big morning in Times Square.
So much excitement. Makes you feel good, though. Yeah, that's how I feel every morning.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty good. You don't want to miss that.
This is going to be good.
The only show to go across America.
I'm from Lakeland, Florida.
San Francisco.
Idaho.
The only show to make superstars. The winner of American Idol is Carrie Underwood. The only show to change lives.
I grew up in the projects. My mother went to jail when I was a kid. We will rise. Whoa.
We got you. American Idol, February 16th on ABC.
A son making demands.
I am not listening to him abuse my staff. He's out.
A daughter abusing drugs.
You knew she smuggled heroin on the airplane.
God, no.
This family.
You've got a daughter that has overdosed and died.
Is ready to implode.
Are you doing drugs now?
I'm on medication.
What?
I'd rather not say. This isn't about me.
It's about whatever I decide it's about.
New Dr. Phil.
Monday at 4 on Local 5.
You're watching This Week in Iowa, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Iowa.
Welcome back, everybody. Jack Miller here, and I'm joined by Professor David Peterson from Iowa State University, Professor of Political Science. Welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Well, let's talk about some caucus headlines. Before Monday, we have what a lot of people feel could be a real rumble on Monday, because compared to the last few caucuses here in Iowa, we just have more candidates in a race that's perceived to be very close. What are you expecting in terms of how crazy it could be on Monday night?
Oh, it's going to be a madhouse, right? I mean, I think the participation is going to be probably record-setting. So we're going to have more people packed into these rooms in the high school gyms or the churches or wherever they're having a caucus than we've ever had before. And they're going to be split between 4 to 5 major top-tier candidates. How they end up deciding to separate themselves into each of those groups in each of those locations is pretty unpredictable.
Could be a long night, and there's also some differences this year in terms of the volume of numbers that are going to be reported. We're going to have raw count number 1. Apparently, the numbers are going to be released. Yep. Raw count number 2, and then of course you have the little thing we call the delegate count too, which is really the big number. Do you foresee a lot of spinning, maybe a lot of disagreement even about who wins the Iowa caucus?
Oh, absolutely, right. As you said, there's going to be these 3 sets of numbers. I mean, historically, the Iowa Democrats have only released that final one, the delegate count, which has led to some probably fair complaints that the system isn't very transparent. So this year they're releasing both how many supporters each candidate gets at the first round across all the precincts, and then how many supporters they have at that realignment. It's likely, I think, that we may end up getting different answers to those 3 questions. Who gets the most in the first alignment, who gets the most after realignment, and ultimately who gets the most delegates. And so each campaign is going to get to pick and choose which number they want to highlight as their best case for the narrative going forward.
It's almost inevitable that some candidate that didn't get the most delegates is going to look at the first raw count vote and say, hey, just like 2016, Hillary got 3 million more votes, but Trump's president. Something along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I think each of those numbers are going to signal something different, right? So that first alignment number is the number of people who are probably really dedicated to the candidate, right? And if Iowa had a primary, that would be the only number, right? The only thing that actually matters. The realignment numbers, in part, suggest who can reach out to a broader segment of the party, because they've got to draw people from the supporters of other candidates who weren't viable. And then the delegate count has a little bit of that last piece of the sort of total amount, but the delegates are also geographically specific, right? So it's kind of like when we vote for state legislature. If one candidate runs up a huge margin in one seat, those extra votes don't get to count for another seat. Right. You know, so you can get these differences between, say, the number of votes that a party wins for the state house versus the number of votes that the governor gets, right? And that geography, the ability to be competitive across the whole state is what's going to matter for that last final delegate count.
That's why they're out there shaking hands in every little corner of the state, because they just know how it works on the ground here in Iowa. Let's talk about the status, the bigger picture of the status of the Iowa caucus. Has the status of this caucus come down at all in recent years? There's been the criticisms that Iowa's not very diverse. And then let me give me 4 names of presidential candidates right now. Michael Bennet, Michael Bloomberg, he got in late, obviously. John Delaney, Deval Patrick. Where have they been, and does it say anything to the overall importance of Iowa as number 1 to go?
Let me start with the sort of first some of the criticisms, and I think some of the criticisms are legitimate, right? Iowa is a whiter state than average, and particularly for the Democratic Party, Iowa Democrats are whiter than Democrats in the rest of the country. And, you know, we know race matters in politics, and we know that the Democratic nominee, if he or she's going to be successful, needs to be able to build a coalition that has a lot of support from the African American and Latino communities. And so a state going first that is as Anglo as we are, it's a real concern. In terms of the candidates, I mean, I think Bloomberg is the exception, right? Bloomberg got in late, and as a result, he knew he wasn't going to be competitive in Iowa. So we've been doing some polling at Iowa State, and we had a poll go into the field pretty much right after Bloomberg got into the race. And the general reaction of Iowans was that they were pretty unhappy with him. Some of that is his decision to skip, but also there seems to be I think there was some resentment about his attempts to jump the line. Right? All these other candidates have been here for the state fair. They've been crisscrossing the state, and then Bloomberg did not do the hard work that I think is important for Iowans. They didn't much care for him. The other candidates have sort of seen the handwriting on the wall. Delaney's been here a lot. Delaney, I think, has actually more candidate visits than any other candidate in the race. Because he started very early, right? He started running super early, and lately he's been a little less engaged. But the others have moved on, in part because they know they aren't going to be successful here.
Okay. Can't let you go without talking about the energy at Iowa State. Obviously, a lot of folks who identify as Democrats on campus there. How is the energy this caucus season compared to others that you've seen?
It's pretty high, right? I mean, I think, again, with the participation expected to be higher than there has been in previous years, right? We feel that on campus as well. The most part, the three candidates that seem to be dominating campus are Bernie Sanders, not too surprisingly, Elizabeth Warren, and then there's a sizable Andrew Yang group on campus as well. From my sense, right, Iowa State University is in part the engineering school, and so we've got a heavy STEM influence, and I think Yang is appealing to those students, particularly students who may not have been as engaged or as involved in previous cycles.
Running out of time, one real quick question. Do most of the students have to caucus back where their home addresses are?
No. They can caucus in Ames. University of Iowa students can caucus in Iowa City. They can caucus in local places.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Professor David Peterson from ISU. Really appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Still ahead, many caucus goers are still undecided at this point. We talk with one undecided on why she still remains so.
It's really bad.
During the first year and a half of my first daughter's life, she suffered with anemia. It was scary. So seeing our NP, nurse practitioner, she came up with a plan how to treat it. She was always there. She's actually a part of the family. Choosing an NP was the right choice for my family. I wouldn't trade it for anything. My name is Charlene, and we choose NPs.
Me too. Consider an NP. When patients choose, patients win.
Local 5 wants to kickstart your spring planning and save you money at the Des Moines Home and Garden Show. Thursday, February 6th is Local 5 night. Don't miss $5 admission at the box office after 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 6th. It's a thank you to our viewers from Local 5.
For Local 5, most accurate isn't just a phrase, it's everything.
The rain comes in late Friday night now after midnight and into Saturday morning.
Every commute.
Frost is possible early on today, so may need that scraper handy.
Every school day.
That's 4 degrees, feeling like sub-zero temperatures when you factor in the light breeze.
Every forecast accurate, so you can plan your day.
20 to 25 mile per hour sustained winds gusting as high as 30.
Local 5 weather. We are Iowa's most accurate forecast.
People are hungry for things that can make their life better, whether it makes them healthier.
Inspiring stories that give you what it takes to take the next step to follow your own dreams.
People run across a situation where you might not be able to figure out how to accomplish a goal. We can introduce them to somebody who might have a solution.
You're going to know what's happening here across the state of Iowa.
A show that inspires and empowers you to make the best decisions for your family. Watch Iowa Live, weekdays from 7 to 10 on CW Iowa 23.
From kids to sleep.
Their symptoms got better than if they had taken a real medication.
We diagnosed the placebo phenomenon. And it works. New doctors.
Monday at 3 on Local 5.
Welcome back, everyone. Oh, those rare and coveted undecided voters. That's what all the candidates are gunning for right now in these last moments before the caucus. We have one joining us today, Emily Shields. Welcome, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
So you are undecided. At this point, we're getting close to the end. So why haven't you made a decision who you want to caucus for?
Well, I did decide twice. Okay. But those candidates have both dropped out. So now I'm kind of at a point of needing to make a third decision and just feeling really uncertain about that.
Okay. Do you mind telling us who the candidates were that you would hope to see move on?
I supported Julian Castro first and then Cory Booker.
And what was it about those two candidates that you liked?
Honestly, those are both people whose political careers I've followed for a long time. I'm very interested in issues around immigration, and Julian Castro made that a central focus of his campaign. I also am definitely looking for a positive, I guess, sort of affirmative, here's what we're going to do message, and I heard that from both of them as well.
Okay. Do you have anybody that's kind of on your radar, somebody that you're more gravitating to at this point, or is it really a blank slate?
It's probably not 100% a blank slate. I would say that Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar are up there, so I guess I'm the New York Times. But yeah, which they're very different to me in a lot of ways. But yeah, those are in there, but a lot of the other candidates are also still in the mix, I would say.
So when you get to your caucus location, what do you think it is that's going to get you to make a decision? What is it that you need to see or hear or even feel?
I don't know. I think it'll just be that it's the moment where I have to say, I'm helping to run my caucus site, so I think I'm going to be focused on that. And then I think we're going to walk around and start counting. And when we get to the group I'm interested in, I'm just going to say, count me for this one too, and just kind of go with how I feel in that moment, because I've kind of given up the idea that I'm going to feel perfectly good about whatever the decision is.
Okay, and you've caucused before?
Yeah.
Yes. So,
every chance I've had.
Exactly. So you know how it is when you get into that room. Sometimes things change and the energy kind of catches you up.
Yeah, and there might be, I mean, once some of the math gets started, maybe I'll feel like my support makes more of a difference in one camp or another, and that would be a factor.
And as we're heading into these last moments, what would your advice as an undecided voter be for the candidates as they're trying to catch people's attention? What message would you like to see coming from them?
I just continue to be looking for a positive message, despite I think we are in some pretty scary times in a lot of ways, but I'm looking for a vision of what could be.
Okay, I think that there's a lot of people that feel that way right now.
Yeah.
We want to thank you so much for your time. Best of luck, caucus
Thank you.
night.
I appreciate it.
I'm sure you'll come to the decision that's right for you.
I'll have to at some point.
Yes, and we'll be right back.
Imagine all the progress we can make in the next 4 years. Imagine a country where affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. Imagine a world where America leads on climate change. Imagine a president who stands up to the NRA and gets assault weapons out of our schools. What we imagine today, you can make reality. But first, we need to beat Donald Trump. Then there will be no limit to what we can do. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
It's your voice and your vote. No matter your choice, decisions of politicians impact your everyday life. That's why Local 5 asks the tough questions.
You guys knew about this last year. Why not fix the program last year?
Uncovering the facts so you can make the right choices for you.
How do you close the wealth gap in our country?
From the State House to the Capitol, your legislators and candidates can affect real change. Know what their plans could mean for your family. Get local politics alerts straight to your phone. Opt in today for custom alerts on the We Are Iowa app.
Not in Kansas anymore.
Are you a good witch or a bad witch?
You represent the Lollipop Guild?
You have no power here.
Now be gone before someone drops a house on you.
Follow the yellow brick road.
I don't care. Because.
Oh,
I don't care. I'll get him for this. And his little dog, too.
There is no place like home. And for great TV, there's no place like Cozy TV.
We have a president who thinks everything is about him. His tweets, his golf courses, his ego. But I think the job is about you. Your health care, your schools, your security, your families, and your future. I'm Amy Klobuchar. I'll be a president and a commander-in-chief who restores decency to the White House and gets things done for you. That's why I approve this message.
Well, thanks for joining us on This Week in Iowa. We hope to see you again next Sunday. You got to get accustomed to Stephanie and I being here in this role instead of Sabrina. Sabrina, if you haven't heard, is just about ready to deliver twins. So best of luck to her, and she should be back in about 3 months.
Absolutely. And remember, you can always listen to This Week in Iowa via our podcast, which you can find on most any platform. Jack and I will be hosting your caucus night coverage at 5, 6, and 10 on Local 5 News. And you can always visit our website, weareiowa.com, for more information on how the caucuses are going to work this year. It's a little different.
It's going to be fun. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.